Welcome back, everybody, to the Booked Solid podcast. This is Stephanie Mack, and I'm here with Hannah Caitlin Parker, my co host. And we are honored today to have an incredibly special author as our first guest for season 2. TI Lowe is here with us, everybody. She is the #1 internationally best-selling author of 20 novels, including best-selling smash hit Under the Magnolias, debut breakout Lulu's Cafe, and most recently, Low Country Lost. Tanya is a country girl with magnificent stories, and we couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Tanya.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes,
Of
we're
course,
so
we're so
excited.
excited. And we also have some connections here. I mean, Hannah and I are the newbies over here, but
Mhm.
Hannah and T.I. Lowe are Tyndale sisters,
Yes.
and T.I. Lowe and I share an agent. So we're all kind of connected, and it's just really neat to have you. And I get to hear the most wonderful things about you all the time. And I just was introduced to your books this year, and I'm so happy I was. So this is just extra unique for us.
Well, I'm glad to get to know you too. Considering we're sisters, we need to,
Right?
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's so many things we want to talk to you about today, but we would love to kind of go back to the beginning for you. Whether that's before your debut, you can tell us, but Lulu's Cafe, which I'm dying to read next, it just kind of exploded. It was a smash hit for a self-published book. It really was a breakout. So we want to hear about that experience and any writing or writerly dreams that might have preceded that. Tell us about your start.
Where to start? Oh my goodness. So everyone said, I always ask, did you always know you want to be a writer? And I think, me as a old Southern girl, it was just in my root system to be
Mhm.
storytellers. I remember my grandma way back in the day, she'd sit on the front porch and tell me stories about, her upbringing and whatnot. But it was always peppered with all kinds of little tales and such. It was never just a straightforward thing. And
Mhm.
so I know I got that from my grandma Inez, which I'm named after. T.I. is Tanya Inez. And
Hmm.
I just always wanted to, but I live in this tiny little town called Loris, and we're surrounded by farmland, or we were.
Mhm.
A lot of new buildings happening now. And my first job ever was a tobacco field. And I did okay in school. I squeaked by, but I just never thought a dream of becoming an author or writing a book. That just didn't seem like something I could get a hold of. It was just like too far away from my
Mhm.
little tiny town in South Carolina. So I just never really pursued it. I wrote church plays, I wrote poetry, just that little thing. And so it was always a dream. My senior year of high school, I told one of my friends, I said, Christy, one of these days I want to write a book.
Mhm.
And I never had told anyone that. I used to like jot down stories, just for myself and whatnot. She says,
Mhm.
"Yeah, you want to write a book?" She says, "One day I want to win the lottery." So, joke between one of us that, it's big dreams. They're probably not going to
Mhm.
happen. And so, but God did answer one of my other dreams, and that was to have a family of my own. I come from a broken family. We had a lot of trials in my childhood, and I wouldn't wish that childhood on anyone. I won't get into that, but I always wanted a family that I could nurture and I could love, and it would be a whole family.
Mhm.
And so, God granted me a good husband. We've been married 27 years. Yep,
Wow.
27 years.
Wow.
And
Amazing.
I have a 23-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter. And so when Lydia started kindergarten, I was a stay-at-home mom. God bless me to do that. Hardest job ever,
Mhm.
but the best job ever.
Mhm.
I won't take anything for that. And so Lydia started kindergarten. And you girls knew when you asked me that question, you ask an author a question, you're going to get the long answer. I'm trying my best to break it down.
We
You're
really want
right.
the long
Yes.
answer. We always want the whole story because we're story girls too.
So sweet Lydia, she's about to start kindergarten. She says, "Mama, now that you've grown up, what are you going to be?" So in her mind, she's like, "Mom, got to do
Oh.
something."
Mhm.
But we prayed about it. I tried, I thought about going back and finishing. I had started 2 years of college. I thought about going back and finishing that, or maybe substitute teaching so I could stay with Nathan and
Mhm.
Lydia's schedule. But no answers came. And so Lydia started school August and the answer came in October. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so I was able to be her caregiver for the next 3 years. Well, in that season, it was already a tough season, but we had a loved one and she was in an abusive relationship. And I kept telling, I remember a conversation in the chemo lab with Mama. I said, I don't understand why she doesn't get out. We gave her options to get rid of this guy. Why is she staying with him? And Mama said, I never forgot. She says, Tanya, you'll never know unless you walk in an abused woman's shoes. So now that I'm an author of 20 books, I can say this, but I pretty much, in my creative mind or whatnot, I put those shoes on. I went and I did the research on like the statistics on domestic violence and all that. And then in that just all that research, I began writing Lulu's Cafe. And I started telling Mama about it while I was writing it. And she said, you got to share it. You need to share it, Tanya. And I remember her telling her hospice nurse, because it was lung cancer and it progressed to brain. Mama said, this is my daughter, Tanya. She is an author. And of course, I'm like, I know I'm not, Mama. Mama, it's, she's not, that's sweet of her to say, but I lost Mama 11 years, September 13th. We just had her anniversary last week, and no, 19th. She passed away in 2013. And I just knew I had to figure out how to keep this promise to her. I didn't know what to do with a book. And so I was like, well, let's go back to the Google machine. And I started researching on how to do that. I even went to my library in town, and she helped me find these books on agencies and literary publishing houses and whatnot. But I was like, I'm not good enough I'm not even worrying with this mess. I don't know what to do. So Kindle Direct Publishing, I went that route. And I said, I'm just going to put it out there and say I did it, and I kept my promise. I didn't tell anybody I did it. So I had a book on Amazon, and I didn't tell anybody. I was like, it's not going to be any good. No one's going to read it. But finally, we had a rare ice storm in February that year. And I was like, well, I don't have to face anybody for a while. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell my closest friends. But y'all wasn't thinking about that. And they were ready to skin me for sure. But so I did it January 2014. And by that May, it hit #1 on women's inspirational fiction on Amazon.
Amazing.
How'd that happen? How'd that happen? So it was just like it opened this floodgate to I wanted to write, and I'm still not. I don't feel like I've caught up yet. But I tell everybody, I said that's what happens when you wait till you're 38 to pursue a dream that's heavy on your heart. But it's just been a wild roller coaster since then.
Wow,
that is so incredible that you just put it out there, and it was truly that great. I'm especially dying to read this book for so many reasons, but I'm also curious. I don't know how much pulse you had on all of the It Ends With Us drama over that book and movie, but it's a very secular look at domestic violence, but like huge in the media. I want to read your Christian take on that topic. I'm so happy when it gets more attention, and I love what you said about you put on those shoes as the writer, because how can you ever know but putting on those shoes? I'm so excited, and obviously it's a fantastic book, so it was just strictly word of mouth. It just traveled. You just put it out there.
No, it's just one of we're all trying to figure this thing out with social media or whatnot, but it's just like I don't feel like there's if it catches, it catches, and that book just did, and it still blows my mind how that happened. But and I always try to I've written some really heavy topics, and one of my first followers in the book world, she said TI writes grit with grace. And so I really, really try to stick to that. And I always love that she said that. I'm like, well, I'm stealing it. That's what I want to say. Grit with grace, because, they're ugly topics, domestic violence, under the magnolias, mental illness. It's just, they're gritty topics. And I feel like as a writer, if I want to do it justice, I have to, I definitely have to respect the topic and do the research on it. But I try to present it in a lot of grace. And the one good thing about Lulu's Cafe, it was pretty gritty, but I was able to do something that a lot of in the real world they don't have, and I was able to give Leah a happy ever after. So that was fun.
That's amazing. So you've written 20 books since that one came out.
I've published 20 books. I have about five more just sitting around waiting their turn.
Amazing.
They
So,
they may never see the light of day. I mean, but still.
That is amazing.
so along your journey, obviously you're somebody who was a breakout indie success.
Mhm.
How and when did you meet Danielle? I'm dying to know, how did you go
Oh,
from
you're gonna
indie
love
to
this story.
traditional? Oh, I can't wait.
Buckle up. Buckle up. I've got you
Ready.
another story. So everybody said when's your next book? It all started. I didn't even have social media, and I had to get social media because this book was out there,
Hmm.
and so that started building. And then you got all these sweet readers reaching out, wanting to know what's next, and then someone said, well, you really need an agent, and
Hmm.
so I did the research on. And my advice to any author out there, how do you find the agent that's right for you? Look at what you write and look at authors that are similar to your writing. And normally just as simple as looking at acknowledgments in their book. You
Hmm.
know who their agent is. And so that to me is the best way to find someone that is close to what you would expect to represent you.
I still feel like
Hmm.
that's the best advice. I
Yes.
mean, even when friends come to me, they're like, you know a lot about agents by this point. I'm like,
Hmm.
who does the agent represent? Compare
Yeah.
yourself and find them in the back of the book. So, yes.
Like if you fit there.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to, gosh, I don't even know how many letters I sent out, but one was to Danielle. And so that summer, I'm full blown mom. I had a flip phone, y'all. And it was in the house. Back then, I did not carry a phone around. I was busy minding little children.
Hmm.
We were outside in the dark. I come inside and there's a missed phone call from Chicago. And I'm like, oh, it's probably one of those spam things. And it
Hmm.
was Danielle. She left me a
Oh my
message. I was
gosh.
like, covered in sweat and thank goodness I called her back and she started telling me who she represented. And funny enough, she represents Francine Rivers.
Hmm.
And my friend the week before gave me Redeeming Love to read, and it was on my nightstand.
Mm.
And so she said, well, in the meantime, send me something. I'll look over it. In the meantime, definitely read Francine's book. I think you'll love it.
Hmm.
And so while I was waiting on her, and it's a lot of waiting in
Hmm.
traditional publishing world,
A whole lot.
just get ready.
Yep.
I learned some patience, and it definitely tested my patience in this time.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I read Francine's Redeeming Love, and y'all, when I got to the end of it, which was a beautiful story, but at the end, the two different couples, and I don't think I've given anything away by saying this, but the two, if you haven't read it, which most people have,
Mhm.
one couple had a child named Lydia. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. That's my daughter's name. How cute. And then the next couple I was reading, and their son was named Nathan. And I'm like, well, that's my son's name. This is Godwink. I know it's going to,
Mm.
Daniel's going to represent me. It's just a done deal. God just revealed to me I'm where I'm
Mm.
supposed to be.
Mhm.
Probably about 2 weeks after that, Danielle emailed me and said no.
Oh my goodness, she did.
She told me no. And she gave me, but I fully respected for her for that
Mhm.
because she told me this is what you need to do to get to the next level. She gave
Mhm.
me so much advice, and she said, "Keep in touch with me." She said, "Now it's not the right time. It's not the right."
Mhm.
And so, we were fragile humans,
Yeah.
and I was, at first I was done. I'm done. This is not
Mhm.
me. I'm not. She's done. Told me no, it's not working. But and then I applied all the advice she gave me, and I kept working, and I stayed in touch with her.
Was it
And just,
craft advice or?
like she said, showing and telling, grow
Uh-huh.
your
Mhm.
platform because publishers are looking at your platforms.
Mhm.
Um, just never put anything on there that you wouldn't want Jesus to see.
Yep.
Yeah.
But because they want to know that you have plenty to bring to the table when you go to a
Mhm.
publisher. That's just the
Right.
way it is now.
Yep.
And so I worked on that, but then she said yes. And she said, we might have to start you small to get into a smaller publishing house. How are you about that? I'm like, yeah, whatever, she's always been straightforward with me, and I like that. I
Yeah.
don't like candy coating. Just tell it to me straight.
Same.
Um, Francine, now I wanted to be with Tyndall House, and I was like, I'm going to keep praying about it. If it's meant to be, that's where I'm going to be. And they actually they came back and wanted to buy the rights to Lulu's Cafe, and they republished it. And then I don't know how many books we've done since then, but it's a great place to be a part of. It's definitely a family. So there's that long story.
That's amazing.
We love
And
it.
I know Danielle and I were chatting yesterday. She was so excited that we were talking. And we were talking about Under the Magnolias, which I am almost done with, and I am so obsessed. You were so talented, and I love how editorial Danielle is. I was just telling Hannah this morning how I just feel so lucky and blessed that she's so detail oriented at the granular level is making me a better writer. But anyway, she was telling me about Under the Magnolias, and she said it's just one of those books that just went to Tyndale House in a very early stage because it was so darn good. And that's a testament to your raw talent and that you took what she said and were able to apply that, because that's hard. Hearing just those conversations as a writer, we are fragile. It's like, oh my God.
You are.
How do I show and not tell? It's some of those basics when you just know you have to work on it. You just have to work on it and you can get better. But where in the lineup then, which number is Under the Magnolias? Like Lulu's Cafe was your first book. When did you write Under the Magnolias? Do you remember? I'm just curious because it's like a perfect book. I'm like, I'm sure Lulu's is too, but I'm just like,
there's probably about 15 or 16 in there.
Okay.
And funny enough with that, I didn't have a contract on that book. We were in the middle of the pandemic, and Danielle kept saying, "What are you working on?" I'm like, I was like, "This was one of those." I love this expression: is you dance like no one's watching. I was writing that book like no one was ever going to read it. It was just something I wanted to understand better. I had kept seeing these headlines in late 2019 of these prominent male figures in the community committing suicide. There was youth pastors, there's pastors and whatnot, and it just really bothered me. What brought them to that point that they didn't think they could reach out and get help? That they thought, taking their own life was their only, the only solution. So that was just down a rabbit hole. And I remember we were in the middle of the pandemic. We were painting shiplap to go on a wall in our house. I'm covered in paint. Danielle, I finally had sent it to her. I'm like, there's a lot of characters in that book. There's a lot going on in that book. And I just didn't think, I thought she was just going to be like, no, not it. So she called me covered in paint and she said, you did something that no one normally does. She said, you made me cry. And
You've made it.
That book and Tyndall House, and they accepted it right on the spot as is. They're going to take this character out, they're going to take that character out, but no.
Which we all know is so rare for them to just accept a book as is. And any publisher.
I turned mine in the 1st of September. It's due in October, but I keep waiting, and I'm like, because I met with Elizabeth at ACFW and she was explaining the process and how she was like, if it's good, it'll move faster. And I was just like, okay, like how bad is it going to be? And so that's amazing. That's like Stephanie said, it's a testament to your talent. But I just love circling back to you talking about the grit with the grace. I was telling Stephanie, I finished Low Country Lost last night and I just sat there afterwards, like just staring blankly, like thinking about how you do that so well and you take these heavy topics. And I think that's something Stephanie and I both have struggled with as writers is how much is too much, where do you pull back, where do you make a joke, or that balance of where you want to have these novels with depth but also that feel good to read. And I think especially on social media right now, it's this huge argument of like, this book is complete fluff, like a fluff happy book, there's no conflict. There's none of that. And I feel like those have their place, but like, then you've got Francine Rivers books on the other end, and like, where do you fall in the middle? And you do that so well, so well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
It's just like you said, there's a place for every genre, every
Mhm.
style.
Mm-hmm.
I never want an author to feel like they have to try to be anybody else but themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when they flew me up to Chicago to sign contracts, the question they said, "Is there anything you want us to address before you sign?" I said, "Well, my only worry is you're going to change my voice because I write as I speak. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a very Southern vernacular. That's just," and they said, "No, that we want your voice." So,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
have that assurance from my agent and publisher that I can just be me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I tell authors all the time, writers all the time, just write. Don't write
Mhm.
what you think someone else wants to hear.
Mhm.
Um, and then the whole thing of the tough topic, even in my real life, the tragedy that I've endured, I always have to find humor somewhere
Mhm.
in there to get through that.
Mhm.
Stephanie, you were saying you read Under the Magnolias, and there were some really, really tough days in that writing, and
Yeah.
I would need a break from it. So
Yeah.
there's this. I won't give it away, but you'll know because you just finished it. The or about to finish it.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the funeral home.
Mm.
Do you remember? Have you been there yet?
I don't think I'm there yet.
There's a just out of the blue crazy scene in a funeral home. But that was a fun. I need those fun days in my
Mhm.
writing, and so I put it. I hope that the readers appreciate them as much as I do as writing them.
Yeah. And I
I
think,
am
sir,
really,
go ahead. Sir.
oh yeah, go ahead.
Go. No, you go. You're
I
fine.
was just gonna say, like, you have those moments. Yeah, it's just like I love the character of Austin and like the relationships, and it's just this,
Mhm.
it's so readable, but you're dealing with this heaviness of mental illness. And I was really in awe of the way you painted mental illness specifically. And even that, it sounds like, given your childhood and the different things you've encountered, like you said, you knew someone with, you know, living in an abusive relationship with the mental illness. Did you do a lot of research for that? Was that just from personal observation and your heart? It was just so well done. And it's something we talk about on the podcast and are going to dive into this season. Just first of all, bravo. And how was that writing? And I can see how you would need to take breaks. It's just like, oh my.
Yeah. Uh, there was a friend of mine. It was like Netflix, but it was not pure flicks. It was something else, and it was just about Christian shows. And there was this whole reality series, and she gave me her code so I could, because it was through her church, and I could watch it because I was telling her what I was writing. And it was family members dealing with loved ones with mental illness, and it all
Mhm.
kept directing to bipolar disorder.
Mm,
And never did I, when I started researching the book, did I think it was going to be about bipolar disorder, which it ended up being. And I had even toyed with the idea of writing it in the father's point of view, but then the family stories on how, even though they didn't have bipolar disorder, they experienced all of the side effects, or so to speak, to
Mhm.
go along with it. And so that's when it started developing into I was going to write it from the family's point of view, and Austin. So she got to wear that hat. But yeah, it was a lot of research. I read some books, and just so I really wanted to make sure I got it right. And one of my friends, her husband's bipolar, and she said, "You wrote his story." So,
oh.
and then a pastor, y'all, because Dave in the book, he's a pastor of this misfit church, and in my
Mhm.
opinion, that misfit church is what the church is supposed to look like.
Mhm.
So I
Mm,
the church that I would want to attend because I'm a misfit, and the pastor is from Australia, and I was actually on his podcast. He said, I have bipolar disorder. I'm like, oh no, did I mess it up? And he's like, no, you did it just right. So
mm.
that's always reassuring. And
Amazing.
I
I
will
love,
say, every story I go into,
Yeah.
I'm diving into the Bible verses that I feel like will support this story. And I'm praying. I'm like, God, give me the story you
Mm-hmm.
want me to tell, and don't let me get in the way of it. Because
Mm.
I do get in the way of the
Mhm.
story, but man, this is such a sweet spot when you know you didn't get in the way.
Yeah. I
And
think you did it
it's
so well in Low Country Lost. Was talking to Steph about this last night. Is you captured so many of those moments that as writers, like we're aware of them that they're happening in our real life, but we never know do they read well on page. And one of them
mhm.
was in Low Country Lost when she's in Publix and the lady's buying the cake beside her, and she just like has to get out of Publix. And
Mhm.
I just loved, I was like, that could really happen. And I haven't experienced what she's gone through, but I have experienced grief. And I know those moments just hit you in the most random times. And, it can be something as simple as grocery shopping. And so I just loved how you made it real, like these real moments. They weren't over the top, they weren't this huge conflict happening. It was just your characters living real life. And I feel like in writing, especially in fiction, it's so hard sometimes to do that, because you feel like, okay, this big enough? Does this feel big enough? But those held so much more impact, those just little everyday
Mhm.
moments. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, I also loved on your website. I saw this week that it said you're perfect for fans of Delia Owens and Nicholas Sparks, two of my all-time favorites. And if you're listening and you haven't read T.I. Lowe's books, that is so true. And I love that you're a Christian voice, first of all, on all of these hard topics. And secondly, in a genre that's just one of my favorites, like Where the Crawdads Sing is always going to be at the top of the list for me. But I feel like that Kaya character and Austin, there's like
Mhm.
that similarity of like the young girl who has to be strong.
Yeah.
And you wrote it so powerfully. And I love knowing that you're like a Christian author I can like trust with the worldview. I read widely, but it's so refreshing to know that like you're praying on the other end. You're gonna be experiencing this through a Christian lens. It's just a knockout book. So if those authors speak to you guys, you've got to get your hands on Tanya's book. Also, I was going to ask, I was curious if T.I. Lowe was a pen name, but it sounds like it's your real name. It's your real initials.
Yeah, my real initials.
I
I
love
thought I'd
that.
be fancy and go by my initials way back. I, I'm
So
sitting here
fancy.
barefooted. I'll go to the mailbox barefooted here when we get off this call. But I thought I'd be fancy in that aspect. So
I love it. Who are some of your favorite authors that have sort of inspired you or
oh gosh.
shaped you in some way?
So I will tell you real quick when you made that comment about Christian author C.S. Lewis, and I'll get it wrong, but he basically said the world doesn't need more Christian literature. The world needs more Christian authors
I
writing
Mhm.
literature.
love that
Mhm.
quote.
I try to stay there, and I feel like being a Southern girl, I have a little bit more give to that because a lot of Southern fiction your faith is going it always reads through it doesn't
Mhm.
have to stay Christian on it. So I think I can get away with a little bit more sharing my faith in it because I don't know about you, I've never read a Christian book, I mean a Southern book where they at least weren't going to church service or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like so back when my mom was in chemo lab and I read across the board, so some of this might not be for you, but it was some really heavy moments in those chemo labs. And during that time, I started reading the Stephanie Plum series by Janet Ivanovich, The One for the Money.
I
It was
haven't read them, but
They
gosh,
were
I've always seen them.
hilarious. Now
Oh.
they're worldly, they're not, but she is a bounty hunter, and it was the humor in it. And so I always
Mm,
say Janet Ivanovich showed me it's okay to write humor in your
mm,
story. So I always take that away from her. And then Francine Rivers,
Mhm.
in her story, she showed me it's okay to go to the hard parts. It's
yep.
okay to expose the hard
Mm,
parts. When people want to say, "Oh, Ti's, that's too gritty or whatnot," I'm like, "Have you read the Bible?"
100%.
Yeah. So, and I've read everything by Charles Martin. He writes good old Southern boy stories. So I really enjoy him too.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
Sometimes we
Yeah,
learn from those worldly books. I mean,
yeah,
you can learn about humor and you can learn about story. You can apply that to your
Oh, yeah.
own in such a
yeah.
cool way. So I
That's
love
what I
hearing
was
that.
telling Stephanie earlier, or last night when I finished. I was like, reading your book, it made me realize, like, kind of helped me understand like where I fall in like Tyndale's lineup, not just Tyndale's lineup, but like that sweet spot of writing, like, and just let me kind of know, like, okay, what is like okay to say, kind of push those because there was so much tension in this book. I was telling Stephanie, I was like, there was no spice. It was clean, but the tension, like, it was real life. And like, she said some things that I was just like, oh, she just said that. Like, she admitted that she felt that way about him. Thank you. And
Mhm.
I kind of shied away from that in my first manuscript. And now I've read this and I was like, okay, I can play with this a little bit more, make it a little
Mhm.
more real life. Because I mean, we have those feelings and those emotions. And I just loved how classfully
Thank you.
you explained that, you had those moments and how they kind of bantered and played with each other and
Mhm.
insinuated some things. And it was just so much fun, but it was just done so tastefully that I was like,
Mm,
okay, like, this is okay in Christian fiction, guys. Like, let's
yeah.
we're attracted to people too. Come on.
Yeah.
And that's something
Exactly.
Stephanie and I kind of talk about a lot, is like, it's hard to writing Christian fiction is hard because you're like, you're gonna have those people that push back and are like, they shouldn't kiss, they shouldn't do this, and they shouldn't feel this way, and or have these emotions and things like that. And so I think you
Yeah.
definitely hit that sweet
Well,
spot
thank you.
that
I
Yeah.
will
Stephanie
say
and I enjoy.
a Christian writer, I think, has got to be like one of the hardest genres to write in because,
Mm-hmm.
or worlds to write in,
Yeah.
because people don't they want to keep you on your toes, the secular world and the Christian world. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a fine line we're having to walk, but I think that that line is broadening more so. And let's just be real.
Hmm.
And gosh, I could say all day long, like Song of Solomon in the Bible.
Yes.
There's
And
tension there. There's
Yes.
attraction, but even when I'm reading fiction, the best part to me is the tension, the
hmm
Mm-hmm.
build up.
Mm-hmm.
It's none of the acts that after it's like, oh, it's the downhill
Yeah.
act. I always like to focus on the tension building up
Mm-hmm.
and
You did
relationships.
it very
totally.
well in this one. We had actually put out a post on our podcast Instagram the other day of spice or no spice and had people answer. And I think one girl actually quoted Song of Solomon back on
She
the
did.
comment. And so it was like, guys, have you read
I
the
know.
Bible?
Yes.
And just the people and the women that God used and that
Mhm.
Jesus interacted with. There are multiple prostitutes. There are
Yeah.
people like David who put the man at the front of the army to kill him because he was sleeping with his wife. It's like,
Mhm.
look at the Bible. And I think you're doing that so well. And we were going to ask you, you touched on it a little bit, but we wanted to know if you have any observations of the Christian fiction space today, perhaps even in comparison to back when Lulu's Cafe first came out. Is there anything you're seeing trending or that's kind of on your mind or your radar that
It's like,
you would want to share with us?
yeah, like Hannah was saying, even in the 11 years, it's almost been 11 years that I've been in this writing world, which doesn't sound like a long time in some ways, but it sounds like quite a bit. It's
Yeah.
a decade now. It's done a lot of changing. And I remember
Mhm.
when I signed with Tyndall House, they said, we're finally um, branching out into more realistic stories. And I
Mhm.
was so tickled over that because I really didn't think a Christian publisher would pick me up because
Hmm.
I don't ever want to phone in what I'm feeling like I need to write. Now I don't feel like I need
Mhm.
to write smut by no means, but to do a justice of a story like Lulu's Cafe, I had to go there with the abuse. Uh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
this Under the Magnolias with his destructive part of his mental disorder.
Mhm.
When he was on a high, a manic, I had to go there. So
Mm.
I feel like don't if you're a Christian author and you're trying to write and get into this space, write what's on your heart.
Mm.
If you're rooting it in your faith, God's going to give you the right story anyway. Don't worry about if it fits anywhere. I love the idea that there's plenty of room in this space. You can write rom-com, you can write murder mysteries, like Diane Mills. She does all those thrillers. It's just so broad, and just write what's on your heart. I do believe there's more acceptance. And like, we just keep going back. If it's in the Bible, God had a place for misfit people. And I just love that he used so many people that were going through difficult times. Like King David. I mean, he was a mess.
Yes. Mental illness to the max, all of it.
Yes. And Under the Magnolias, I based my Dave on King David, actually. Because King David had these really low lows, then he had these huge highs. I'm like,
yeah.
Did he, did he struggle with bipolar disorders?
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious, I don't know the answer to this. Do you still indie publish at all? Are you hybrid, or are you exclusively traditional with Tyndale?
I can if I want. Like last year, there was this little novella I wrote, and it was just for fun. Even as a writer, I write these heavy topics, but sometimes I just need a vacation ride. And it's
100%.
And I didn't even plan on sharing it. I was like, I just want to write me a Hallmark story.
Yeah.
So the year before, I put in my newsletter, and I just give it out as a Christmas gift to my subscribers. But then last year, I did it on my own, the Holiday Hunt. And it's just a fun little novella. But I can, as long as it's a certain amount of time between publishing the book. The dates, it's in my contract, but they're happy with me to do it. But I'm too busy to do that.
Yes.
No, totally. I know it's something, because I've self-published 2 books, and then Danielle signed me for my 3rd book. And it's something an audience member asked the Tyndale amazing girls. I love Stephanie and Elizabeth so much, but they asked them on the panel if what they felt about hybrid authors, and it was a conversation. So I was just curious. And I was also curious. Okay. I haven't even talked to Danielle about it because I'm just so excited to be traditional and walk that path. But I'm like, if you write an indie book, like your novella, does that go through Danielle or need your editor at Tyndale's buy off, or do you just do it independently and like they trust you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now it'll be different from publishing
author to author. Sure.
But I just told them, I said, I've got this little novella, I want to put it out there. And they said, okay. I think I sent it to Danielle just so she could see what it was about. And just out of respect.
Of course.
I went from self-published to traditionally published, and I was used to wearing all the hats. So I just did it.
Yeah.
And I learned that, I've got to clue them in on some things that I'm doing. So always run your stuff through your agent. And even if you think it's trivial or they don't need to know, don't assume that. Like totally. I assume some things, but it's good to stay on the right page, same page with your publishing teams.
Well, we love to ask this question to everybody. I know we've already touched on it a little bit, but we just love to ask this question. Since you had so much success with Lulu's Cafe without a platform, and now you have built this platform and you're, still publishing, what are your thoughts on platform if you are just starting out as an author and you're wanting to maybe get the agent, land the book deal, all those things? What is your thoughts on, is platform important?
I think so. I know there is a love-hate relationship with social media.
Yes.
But look at the love part. I've made so many reading friends through social media. And these are readers that they have my back no matter what. And they're just loyal. And I always say reading friends are the best friends because, we enjoy we're imaginative, the imaginative world. Imaginative world. Oh my God, that is not right. But anyway, I think, work on your platforms, follow other fellow writers and authors. I will say one of the biggest helps I feel for any author, wherever you are, is Jerry Jenkins on YouTube. That man has the best advice on writing.
Really?
Yeah.
Ooh, we'll link
Never
that
heard
in
of
our show
him.
notes. We've never heard of
Please
this.
do so.
Wait, is he the? Oh, yes. He's
Yeah,
like
he's the Left Behind
left
man.
behind.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Which
I knew that name sounded familiar, but I
I
was like,
know
what?
somebody at ACFW, can't remember if it was a one-on-one conversation or a panel, but they were really talking about how the Left Behind series was pivotal in the Christian market and that really
Mhm.
showed the world that Christian books could sell. And I was so inspired by that because I remember when those books came
Yeah.
out and they were a worldwide success. And I didn't know he had content still coming out. We'll link to
Yeah.
it.
He'll write about the marathon middle. He'll write about how to show, not tell. He'll tell
Oh,
you about
love it.
marketing. I mean, he is fantastic. Definitely. Every time has a new upload, while I'm putting my makeup on or doing my hair, I
Mhm.
always watch his. And they're short and sweet to
Mhm.
the point, and yeah, definitely. And I mean, 10 years. I know people that's been in the writing world for 20, 30, 40 years. It's ever changing and it's always
Mhm.
across, something that's new to learn. So
Yeah.
always be open and learn new things. This is definitely, you can't be a old dog that can't learn new tricks in
Mhm.
this part of the
Yeah.
world. The
I
writing world.
was
You have to,
talking to some of my author friends the other day, and I was like, just so overwhelmed. And so I was like, I'm fixing to just type out everything that we're expected to do as authors or bookstagrammers or whatever. And I sent them this long list, and they were like, is that your to-do list for the day? I was like, no, but this is like what the pressure we put on ourselves as authors, indie authors,
yeah.
bookstagrammers, whatever. I was like, you got to do this, you
Mhm.
got to do that, you got to do this, and all these different social media platforms. And Steph and I always talk about how we're so jealous of these authors that have hit it so big, and they just pop in and are like, hey, I've got a book, bye, and get back off.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just such a balance and such a necessary evil
I
is what Steph
know.
and I call it now.
I know. I know. And then it is good to remember, like you said, Tanya, all of the good. I'm like, I met
Mhm.
Hannah in Instagram DMs, and then I didn't even realize how many internet friends I had made until I went to ACFW and was meeting them and hugging them in the flesh. I'm like, oh, this is like dozens of real friendships. So it's
Mhm.
like there's that good side. And my favorite part are those
Yes.
meaningful connections. And then yeah, the necessary evil of it all is just a balance and wanting to be present in your own life, but using it as the marketing tool that it is. It's crazy that like even when you release Lulu's Cafe and you said when that many years have passed, like social media goes through multiple changes within a year of like
A day.
what's hot, what works, what doesn't, the algorithm. So
Yeah.
yeah, we got to be nimble. Like you said, we can never be can't learn anything new. Like we got to be always learning and it's changing. So cool. Well, you're so inspiring to both of us. It's such a treat. We
Yes.
both look up to you so much, and it's super fun to have these little connections with you and hear where you're at a decade ahead of us on the journey, but we love it. And I'm 38 years old too, and I just signed with my agent, and it's really cool because my daughters see that. I have young girls, and they're all in school now, so I have all this time, and it's neat the timing of that I get to start this journey. So, yay, 38.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for dealing with our technical issues at the beginning. But
Yes.
thank you
Hey,
so.
that's something I'm going to get on when we finish. I'm going to go on my and figure out that whole thing. It's something new to learn today.
Yes, yes.